Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wadcast Podcast, the absolute best podcast in the world when it comes to everything and anything. If you're listening right now, this is the most elite podcast because it's the best, because I'm the best and everyone here is the best. And if you're listening right now, you're incredible for listening to this show because we're all about being the best and everything's amazing. And you're incredible. I bet you work out a lot. You probably lift a lot of weights. You probably run really fast. You probably have a low heart rate. You probably eat really good food. And so congratulations on you being you and being the baddest motherfucker in the world. We're ready to just take on the world today, aren't we? I don't know. I feel like doing well because I ate a lot of salt. I like salt. This episode, I've got a great guest. Get the Rhino. Stan Efferding, everybody. If you don't know Stan, you don't know shit. Stan is probably the strongest bodybuilder in the world. He's when it comes to bodybuilding, the guy was, as amazing as you can get when it comes to bodybuilding. He was let me make sure I say it properly. He was the American IFBB. He was an American IFBB professional bodybuilder. He's also a power lifter and has won many, records in the 275-pound class without knee wraps. His total was 2,226 pounds. In the squat without knee wraps, it was 854 pounds. Did you just hear that? He squatted 854 pounds without knee wraps. I don't want to get into everything he did because we talk about that in the interview, but he was just a badass motherfucker. I got to work out with him today. We did Murph. It's Memorial Day. All you servicemen out there, thank you. Thank you for your service to this country. Thank you to all the good guys out there that are doing the right thing, that care about this country, care about the people, care about doing the right thing. There's a lot of shitty people out there, but you guys that are doing it for all the right reasons and out there protecting us, thank you very much. So that's my little bit for Memorial Day. Murph, tough motherfucker, tough. Didn't talk about it much on the show, but I did it this year. I didn't want to do it, but I did it. Next year, I'm doing it with the vest. I said it now. I'll be ready for the vest next year. I've done it before with the vest. I'm doing it again. As I get older, I'm just getting stronger and faster and better. So watch the fuck out. 68 miles, here I come. Who's coming with me? We're getting lots of support, lots of sponsors. Close to picking the charity. It's going to be a firefighter charity. Looking at a number of them that are good. They're all good, but I just want to find the best one. Going to try to raise some money and also raise some awareness for the fact that these firefighters do a really, really tough job. I watched it. I watched what they do. They risk their lives. Again, another group of people that risk their lives to save properties and homes and lives, lots of lives. And it's a tough gig. And a lot of them die in the process. A lot of them die early in life because of the carcinogenic effects of the fires that they deal with and all kinds of shit that comes to them. You know, that it's not good on your lungs, not good on your stress. It's a tough life. So I'm very thankful that my neighborhood, my house, my family, everyone were saved from the fire. So this is the little bit that I can do and hopefully make it fun. So if you want to get involved with the Backbone Trail Ultra, I got to name it too. We got the Wadcast Ultra. There it is, the Wadcast Ultra. You want to be involved in the Wadcast Ultra, let me know. There's a lot of people getting involved. We don't know if we're going to limit the spots because A, I don't have permits. B, I don't have insurance. So I don't want to make it anything official. It's just me and a bunch of friends going out there and creeping through the woods at night. It's going to take almost 24 hours. Hopefully we're going to do it faster. Moving on. Myopucks, Memorial Day. Myopucks and leopard claw are the leopard claw is the multi-tool tissue device that you use to scrape all your fascia and where you get adhesions and all kinds of congestion, and you scrape it and it's got these edges on it. It's a very expensive tool to be made, very expensive to buy, but if you donate $5 month to the Patreon, which brings you this show every week, you can get one. You can also get with that a Myopux, which is an electronic muscle stimulator. When I say electronic muscle stimulator, it sends electronic pulses into your muscles, which make your muscles move, twitch kind of, which make the blood flow to an area where there could be congestion. Inflammation causes congestion. You want to speed up that inflammatory process. You want to get the congestion out of there so good blood keeps coming to the area and bad blood goes out to the lymphatic system. These electronic muscle stimulators, if you are a athlete of any kind, you need one. This will get you back doing what you do as quickly as possible. You are going to rehabilitate and recover quicker than you ever have, and I can swear by that because I do it constantly. And it's been so helpful, and I don't know if you've noticed, I'm healthy as fuck now. So get yourself one. I after Murph, I wanted to hook my whole body up and just start pumping because I have so much DOMS going on. Other stuff. So the winner, who is the winner chicken dinner? Who is our winner? Our winner is Brian Broderick. I'm hoping, I gotta look at my Excel spreadsheet, but I hope I did not give Brian Broderick one before. Brian, let me know. All right? Don't take two. Don't be a dick. I'll actually see because Troy mails them out and he'll know. But I do want to thank everybody that does donate and want to take care of, all of you guys. Thank you for donating. Thanks for being part of this. This show is great to do, great fun. I hope you are all enjoying it. This week, as I said, Stan Efferding's the guest. Next week, it is Rich Froning. I think maybe a few of you have heard of this guy. He is, he's kind of new to CrossFit. He's the best. He's I don't know. Some people think he's the best games athlete of all time. It's arguable. It's one of those, Ali Frazier. Well, not Ali Frazier because they fought. It's like, could Tyson have beaten Ali? There's always the question, could Froning have beat Frazier? Well, we'll probably never know. And, but tomorrow I'm interviewing him. Tomorrow we'll pose that question to Rich Froning. And what else is going on? You guys, if you're enjoying the show and you don't want to donate, do me a favor, go to iTunes, rate, review, and comment. It's so easy. It'll take you a few seconds, and it really helps the show. So just go rate, review, and comment. Also, what else is going on? You know what I need more than anything? I need a new song. If you listen to the song that plays at the beginning of this, when it's like, whatever that song is, I chose that song when we started the show years and years ago, whatever year it was, 7 years ago or whatever. When we started the show, I took it off of GarageBand or something, somewhere where some player that gives you free music that you're able to use. So if I can't use the song that I'd want to use, I'd probably have like Joe Esposito, You're the Best Around from the Karate Kid, but they're not going to let me use that. So, you have to pay for that shit. So what I need is somebody out there who is musically inclined. I am not you. I am terrible. And my Jason Hour from Talking Shit is unavailable because he's in the weeds with 2 kids right now. But somebody out there that wants to hear your music, send me a little ditty. Send me a little song at wadcastpodcast@yahoo.com, and maybe your song can become the song of the Wadcast podcast. It doesn't have to have lyrics. Could rap, could be calypso music, could be EDM, could be a love song. Whatever you think goes with this show, send it to me, and I will listen to it, and I might apply it, and you might hear it on the next one, and maybe I'll even talk Myopux and Leopard Claw to sending you one. How about that? A Myopux and a Leopard Claw to the person that I choose their song. Sound good? Well, let's see. Last but not least, I think I talked about everything. No, I did not. I didn't talk about what has been helping me so much get through I can't tell you how run down I would be if it wasn't for I'm rehabbing with Myopox, Leopard Claw, doing all my stuff. I'm working out more than I ever have. One of the things that is helping me is my nutrition. I am really, really trying to pack on calories, a lot of protein. It's hard to get the protein all the time. Can't cook steaks every day. Can't make my bison. So I have to do things like supplement. And one of the ones that I'm using, like I said, I use magnesium at night. And during the day, I'm doing some protein. And the company that I decided to go with is Xology, because these guys I can relate to. I understand them. They speak my language. They're CrossFitters themselves. They're based in San Diego, and they've got just the coolest, most awesome stuff. How about these birds? My God, don't interrupt. Don't interrupt when I'm talking about Xology. These guys are awesome. It's whey protein. Of course it's grass-fed. You know I'm not going grain-fed. I'm grass-fed all the way. It's keto. It's paleo. And the only sweetener they use is not a sweetener. It's sort of sweetener, but it's not going to like mess up your insulin or anything. It's not sugar. It's monk fruit. Okay? Check out monk fruit. Do a little research and you'll be like, oh, this is what I want to use. And you can get them in the bags. They got like a 20-serve bag that you keep at home, and they've got single-use pods. So these pods, I love them because you're not bringing shit with you that you're throwing in the garbage can. These things are recyclable, compostable. They are the best little thing. And they're pods. They look like a Keurig. You put it in, you get the shaker from Xology, you put it in, put the water in, put the top down, pod opens, boom, protein's in there, shake it up, and you got whatever you want to put in there. Water, coconut water. I put coconut water a lot. Almond milk sometimes. Boom, you got your shake. And they've got a ton of other products. They've got BCAAs, which is actually their biggest seller, the branched chain amino acids. They've got they use fermented vegetables to create an honest vegan product there. So if you are a vegan and you're out there, this is what you want to do to get your branched chain amino acids, which are the building blocks, and you're going to need that for your protein synthesis. And these guys are all about making them portable. They're sustainable, and they've got just a full range. They got pre-workout, BCAAs, grass-fed WPIs, and vegan proteins. And it's the best I've come across. I couldn't be happier with them. I want you guys to try them out. The promo code is WODcast. You're going to get 15% off your purchase if you go to xology.co. That's xology.co. Got that? Promo code WODcast, 15% off. Check them out. And then, like I said, thank me. So, in saying that, this was longer than I wanted it to be. I hope you're still there, because you're going to hear a crazy, crazy episode. This guy is so smart and full of information. It was like speaking to a professor of nutrition. And I never do this, but I am going back and listening to my own episode because I want to hear him again and again. And no joke, pull out a notebook right now and a pen and get ready to get schooled by this guy. It's such amazing shit and such a good guy. So check out this episode. I hope you enjoy it with Stan Efferding. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the WODcast podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Ift. It's Memorial Day. Thank you to all of the service members out there, anyone who fought for this country, anyone that fights for this country, anybody that wants to fight for this country, anyone that wants to fight me, I'll fight you. Come over to my house, and we'll celebrate Memorial Day by fighting. I'm just kidding. We have a very, very, very special episode because it's post-Murph. I actually did it this week. And this year. I don't usually do it. I did it this year. And our guest today did it too. And he was probably not the most unlikely guy to do it, But you would just look at him and you would go, this is not in his wheelhouse. And he crushed it. But not like he crushes other things, like weights. Ladies and gentlemen, Stan Efferding. You might know him of being probably one of the strongest fucking people in the world. You have records in...
Powerlifting was mainly for the heavy stuff. I was an IFBB pro bodybuilder. I probably shouldn't mention that on this show. Don't hold that against me.
No, that's
powerlifting was definitely my forte. So I competed in that. Now I work with powerlifters and strongmen.
Right. And you work you're in Vegas now, but you were in Seattle?
I was in Seattle for 20 years, in Vegas now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is Seattle have a good powerlifting community?
They're kind of spread out. It's never really been one hub other than maybe West Side Barbell and a couple other, but they're older.
Oh, so West Side's up there?
Yeah, they've been around a long time.
Is that where they started?
No, not in Seattle.
Okay.
I'm just saying, in general, the powerlifting hasn't really had a mecca like Venice was for bodybuilding.
Right.
And the like. It's just strong people. A lot of them train out of their garage.
Is that where you grew up, or you just ended up in Seattle?
Portland, Oregon, University of Oregon. Went to college there, and then ended up in Seattle.
You were a soccer player, correct?
Played soccer and wrestled, yeah.
You would not... you're like the least likely looking soccer player in the entire world.
And I wrestled 115 as a senior, 98 as a freshman and sophomore.
God.
Yeah. I got to college I got a scholarship to play soccer, and I was 135 pounds. The coach told me to go lift weights.
So you have a huge engine then if you were playing soccer.
Yeah, used to. You put all this muscle on and suddenly...
It's hard to move it around.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, what do you weigh now?
I'm right at 250 now. Probably at the peak of my career, I got up to 305, 310.
What do you think you are body fat percentage?
I stay around 10%.
Oh my God! Yeah, you need Google him right now just to get a look. And this man did Murph today. I got to say, when you told me, you said, "Hey, let's podcast on Monday, and then we'll do the show." I was like, maybe we should do it before we work out. And you said, hopefully it's heavy squat day.
Right. No, that was yesterday. I had a seminar in Albuquerque, and so I was squatting with the guys. I was doing 500 pounds for sets of 8 to 10 on the squats, and then I wake up this morning, and we're running a mile. Or me walking. I do a speed walk. A running thing doesn't do much for my knees, but it was much more than I anticipated. I have never done a Murph before. This was the first.
Yeah, it was like your second CrossFit workout ever.
Yeah, the other one 3 weeks ago was just as miserable. And we should say that I think I did set a record though. I think it was the slowest 3,000 meters on the rowing machine. Took me 16 minutes to finish. My legs had frozen up and gotten so I couldn't move them anymore. I was just pulling little with my arms kind of hunched over.
So how did you feel with Murph today?
I didn't feel too bad because I didn't try and run. I did a speed walk through the mile, and so that put me in a good position. Obviously, chin-ups, that many pull-ups with this weight was probably the hardest thing. Obviously, the push.
What did you do for your order?
I did 5, 10, 15. Yeah, 20 sets of 5, 10, 15.
I did something interesting I've never done before. I did 5, 15, 5. So I did 5 pull-ups, 5 push-ups, 15 squats, then 5 push-ups again.
Yeah.
Because I thought break up the push-ups because that's my hardest thing. And I just, after 10 rounds, I was like, no, I'm going back to 5, 10, 15. Because I just didn't want to get up, get down, get up, get down. But I walked in and saw you doing your push-ups perfectly. Like your range of motion, extension, everything. I was like, wow. And they were all unbroken.
Yeah.
You were just smashing those out.
Yeah, those were easy.
Squats unbroken?
Squats unbroken, yeah, those were easy.
What were you doing with the pull-ups? Were you getting 5 every time?
5s, yeah, I was doing 5s.
And you were getting them every time?
I got up to sets 17, 18, 19, 20 right up in there, and I'd touch a toe down to the ground on the way down.
Did you, but you also don't kip at all. You're dead hanging.
Yeah,
no that's
kips.
A whole different story, too.
Yeah, I'd probably rip a shoulder out of my socket.
Sure.
So.
I mean, I would, I just like to kip. I do the butterfly pull-ups because I just want to get it over with.
Right.
So I do it. It's probably horrible for me with how old I am and my range of motion, but I was just like, I got to get this over. With me, workouts, it's like I'd rather sprint up a hill than walk up a hill because I want to get it over with as quickly as possible.
Yeah, yeah.
And people are like, that's harder. I'm like, no, I need to rest. I need to get up there but I've got to say I was incredibly impressed that you came and did it and and it's not in your wheelhouse. It's not, but
I looked around the room. I tried to pick one or two people I thought I could beat, and that didn't happen. I did come in last.
Whoa! Let's talk about who was there today. This wasn't your normal. This was not your normal CrossFit class. I showed up, Mike. I just thought it was just going to be like you, me, Mike Anderson, the owner, and there were 2 games athletes there.
Yeah,
former games athletes. One Masters division. There was a
Green Beret.
A Green Beret. Is he the guy that did it in 32 minutes?
I think so. Former NFL football player.
Two former
NFL football players.
San Diego Chargers. Hunter McIntyre.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anyone.
It's another Marine.
Another Marine, and then.
And who was the CrossFit Games? The young lady that qualified for the games.
Yeah, she's from Invictus, which is one of the top teams. She's been in the games for like 5 years.
Quite a stacked crowd there.
Yeah, it was. Those were some fire breathers, and I got in there, and they were like, "Are you putting a vest on?" I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Yeah,
not with these people around.
I managed to get in the last of the line, so that when they ran out of vests, I was like, "Oh darn!" Snap your finger.
I saw one laying in the corner.
Yeah. Oh well.
And I threw a sandbag over it. So I was like, "Oh, they're all out of vests." I next year I'm going to do it with the vest.
Right.
I've done it before, and it was a nightmare. So anyone out there that does it with the vest on. Stan's going to do it next year with the vest.
Yeah, that would kill me on the chins. I'm 250. I feel like I had my weight worth in comparison to our.
You'd be
our
surprised at your adaptation. I think if you went back and did it again, the running crushes you. If you could substitute out the running and do some other cardio, you might find also that your time would come way down because the time's made up in the run,
right?
And you're going slow on the run, so it's I almost puked.
Hey, that was a speed walk. It was as fast as I could walk. You can't call it a run.
I literally came in at the finish line and I was like, I might actually puke.
I know.
I was like, I don't want to puke in front of these guys.
Well, a couple of guys, they kind of burned themselves out on the run, and then when they started doing the events, they were exhausted already. Of course, I came back kind of fresh because I had just done a speed walk, and so I was jumping right in.
So
I caught up to one of them.
You know what happened? I think a lot of those guys, the former football player guys, they didn't know what was happening. Like, they were just like, all right, I just go all out. And I was like, no, you don't.
Right, you got to pace yourself, that's for sure.
The dude that did in 32 minutes, though, ran a 6-minute mile, the first mile. I think he was the Green Beret.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was freakish. But, I mean, look, we're talking about CrossFit where your world's a whole different world. And, what you guys do is... Hunter was showing me what's his name, not Magnus. He was showing me a guy that does what is the squat where you pick the bar up.
Oh no, I've forgotten his name. I saw him at the Arnold, but he did a freakish squat where he picked the bar up. The bar's put it on end.
Yeah, the bar's on its end, and I think he had 500 some pounds on it.
Yeah,
you get yourself into position by turning your body sideways.
Yep,
loading it onto your back. Then bringing it up straight, and then this guy squats 3 times and then puts it back.
Yeah. Pretty incredible. The strong men are pretty freakish.
Yeah.
The combination of athleticism and strength is, obviously it's not like your CrossFit kind of stuff, but it's just that they have any kind of mobility.
I've had Robert Obst on the show before. Do you know Robert?
I work with Robert.
He's great. And he's got some funny stories.
He's hilarious.
That guy has the best stories about what people request of him. Do you know about this?
I can imagine. I was a pro bodybuilder. You get the weirdest things on your DM. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to comedians.
Old pair of posing trunks. Yeah. Delete.
No, Robert sends them.
Oh, does he? Little sideline making money.
Yeah, he's like $500. Sure. Here's my dirty underwear.
Oh, man. Yeah, the muscle bears, they're out in force in that.
That does not happen in comedy. No one's ever asked for my underwear.
No.
People usually are like,
you've made it when somebody asks you for underwear.
That is too funny. I love to know now that it's like a thing in your community that like people are.
Oh yeah, there's some weird people in that community. That's for sure. Bodybuilding in particular.
Well, bodybuilding it's a different. So what'd you do first, bodybuilding or
bodybuilding? I was 140 pounds in college and I started lifting, and so I just worked my way up to try and bodybuild. And it took me 10 years to get strong enough to where I was competing in powerlifting. And I just thought at the time that the heavier I lifted, the bigger I would get.
Right.
I've since learned, that's not the way to do it necessarily. But I got really, really, really strong, and so I started powerlifting, and then spent 20 years doing that alongside of bodybuilding. So,
what would the difference be between so powerlifters are just focusing on those main, the bench, the squat,
much,
and that's all they're doing,
and the lower repetitions, which probably doesn't contribute to volumizing and hypertrophy as much as say a bodybuilder would, with more volume and maybe a different repetition range.
Right. And you guys are doing a lot more
variety.
Yeah, because you've got to work on all the different little muscles that are.
Yeah, so you get little things here and there that pop out. You get some pretty freakish, especially now, more so than historically. You get some powerlifters who are, kind of training like Eddie Cohn used to do hypertrophy training in the off season to make himself more complete and to work on weaknesses. And so you get some bodybuilders or some powerlifters now. They aren't, as fat as they used to be. And you get some pretty lean ones that are well conditioned. They're starting to eat better instead of, which we'll talk about today. But and I think that has contributed to them having a much improved physique.
Well, you see that a lot, just not just in bodybuilding or powerlifting. You see it in like the NFL, where these offensive linemen, they used to be like, "Hey, just shovel as much shit in your face as you can, and then get out there and be the biggest man on the field." And now they're like, "No, have zero body fat. Get up there, be as strong and fast as possible, but also be 290 pounds."
Yeah, and I've worked with amateur, collegiate, and professional NFL ball players for over 25 years, along with the strongmen that I work with and the powerlifters. And what happens is when they use that pizza, pasta, pancakes program to pack on as much muscle as possible, they end up getting metabolic syndrome, which is fatty liver disease and the high blood sugars, and they get insulin resistant, and then the food just stops adding muscle and just keeps adding fat. They just kind of peak out in terms of strength and performance. And this is kind of when a lot of athletes will contact me, and I've got to fix that first. Yeah. I've got to take that weight off of them and get their blood sugars better.
They're probably a bit reluctant to take that weight off because that's what they feel like is their power.
And that's one of the things, is to convince them to take the time to get their, and a blood test usually convinces them that. If I can show them that metabolic syndrome, that they're insulin resistant and they're partitioning nutrients straight into fat, and they're not going to build more muscle that way. And maybe if they'll even go so far as to get a sonogram and see the fatty liver.
Sonogram can do that?
Yes.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, an ultrasound. And then the reading is a sonogram.
That's interesting.
You can't see it with an AST/ALT on your blood test. You generally don't, unless the athlete is using some sort of performance enhancing drug that's caused some cirrhosis.
Isn't the H1BAC going to do that too?
It might not necessarily. There can be other things. Yes, fatty liver disease will lead to a high HbA1c and a high fasted glucose and high insulin. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily always translate.
Sure.
That's certainly one of the first things we look at, is can we get your blood sugars down so that you can be insulin sensitive, so we can start getting your nutrients to partition.
I'm so glad to hear you're doing this, and I think it should almost be imperative when trainers work with people that they go, all right, I have a buddy who does it where he goes, I need you to get blood tested, and I need you to get a DEXA scan. And we're going to work off these metrics because these are the important ones, instead of these, how much do you weigh and how much are you lifting now, or how fast you are. Let's go with the important ones that really matter, what's going on inside your body. And I just don't see that happening enough.
No, and particularly with those bigger athletes. They're the ones that are more susceptible. I also see it in the dieting industry, the professional or amateurs and professionals in bikini figure physique, that kind of thing, because they over-restrict. And so those people will present with low iron is a big one, and they'll come to you with low thyroid from metabolic adaptation.
Is that what low iron's going to do? It's going to screw up your
fatigue. Low thyroid is just another symptom of metabolic adaptation. It's usually over-restrictive, micronutrient deficient diets and too much cardio and not enough sleep. And you couple those three things together, which is real common in the people that compete in figure physique and bikini. and you get the other end of the spectrum. We talked about metabolic syndrome for those people who are eating too much and the wrong kinds of foods.
Right.
And then you get metabolic adaptation, which of course happens to anyone who diets. But these people who do it to an extreme and they get micronutrient deficient, they end up getting amenorrhea, and they're
what is amenorrhea?
A cessation of the menstrual period, and that happens with female athletes who and it's not just necessarily.
My wife has that, but she's pregnant. That's
right. And it's not just necessarily the diet itself. It's the micronutrient deficiency. They go on these typical bikini diets, which historically have been egg whites and whitefish and broccoli, and they're terribly nutrient deficient. Iron, B12, zinc, and then their hair falls out because they have a lack of biotin because they've eliminated the egg yolks, and their thyroid slows. And then they come to me and they're like, I'm a mess. I'm a mess. Yeah. The coach got me to the show, and now look at me.
They look a mess. I've never looked at them and gone, that looks healthy. To me, it looks the opposite of healthy.
Yeah.
Because of you just know that you've drained all that water out of your body. You've everything you've done, and I get it. We can see all your muscles, but you cut your leg open, we can see your skeleton and your muscle. Is that a good thing?
Many of them do over diet and get emaciated and lose too much muscle tissue from a combination of things. They over cardio and they undersleep. And they go at too great of a calorie deficit, and then with the micronutrient restriction at the same time, they just lose a ton of muscle. And that's not the way to do it. I've seen that since as early as the early 90s when I was working with football players, and even the heavy guys would come to practice, and the coach would tell them, hey, you're overweight, you got to lose 30 pounds. And so they go on one of these chicken breast and whitefish diets and start jogging, and they lose the 30 pounds, but then they come to me and say, I'm getting pushed around all over the field.
Yeah.
They lost as much muscle as fat.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem in terms of performance athletics. Even for dieters, you don't want to be taking off a ton of muscle tissue. You want to preserve that.
So when did you start? When did you start? I mean, I know most bodybuilders are, very nutrition oriented, but it sounds like you're more health oriented. When did that start with you?
Throughout my career, I had a problem with a lot of foods. I had pretty severe digestion issues with some foods, which is causing me a lot of gas and bloating and digestive distress and diarrhea and all kinds of stuff. And I was trying to eat those protein powders that were full of, sugar alcohols and tons of sugar, the Gainer's fuels and those kinds of things, and the gallon of milk a day diet, the GOMAD diet, just trying to gain weight and the like. And so I realized at a very early stage that there were certain foods that just made me feel miserable and adversely affected my regularity and the quality of the stool, and I knew that was an issue because I was studying that in college. I studied exercise science.
We had a whole episode where we talked about there's a scale to check your your stool. What's that called?
Yeah.
I forget what it's called. I posted it on the Facebook page one time, and I was like, "What's yours?" And everyone's like, "I'm like a number 7."
I have that scale in the vertical diet download, so people can look at it. And I don't know why the name escapes me, but yeah, I absolutely. That's one of the things I talk to my athletes about. I ask them specifically when they go on the diet, how's the stool? Because that's indicative of so many other things, how you're responding to the foods you're eating.
Interesting.
It's not just, you aren't what you eat, you're what you digest and absorb.
Yeah.
And so I'm careful to talk about those kinds of things. And on any diet, I want to ask people, how's your energy? There's probably two main reasons why people go off of diets, and it's because they get hungry and they get tired.
Right.
And if I can manage those with the appropriate diet, and then the next piece is how's the stool, how's the digestion, especially with these big athletes like Hawthorne Shaw. They were stuffing down 12,000 calories a day of pizza, pasta, pancakes. The videos are really popular.
What do you eat in a day? How many calories?
I'll eat 5,000 still. I have a pretty hefty metabolism. I still train pretty hard.
That's
so
crazy.
I have to put down about 5,000.
How many times do you work out a day?
Just one nowadays.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes I'll do splits just to save time. I might do 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, just because I don't have a full hour to commit.
Gotcha.
And as long as the frequency and volume's there and intensity, you can split up those, whatever kind of split you use or body part split.
Right.
It's not too terribly important when and how.
Right. And then what do you give it? What do you give a body part? How much rest?
Usually 72 hours.
72.
Yeah, twice a week. It seems to be optimal for training any particular body part. And, you could do your whole body on Monday and your whole body on Friday, and that would still satisfy your twice a week. 10 to 20 sets per body part tends to be the optimal range for hypertrophy, if that's the focus. And then, the intensity component is that you probably have to get somewhere within a rep or two of failure if you really want to stimulate, some sort of hypertrophy response.
Yeah. Okay, time to interrupt the show. You know I do this a lot. Well, I got to do it because I did Murph today, and I'm in massive, massive, massive pain. I mean, I can feel it starting. It doesn't usually start this early, but it's starting. The volume of push-ups, pull-ups, and squats that you do really creates some DOMS. And DOMS is necessary. It happens. We can't get away from it. But you don't have to suffer. So here's what you do. Get yourself some Tiger Balm Active pre and post workout. Okay. So I put it on before to loosen me up, and then afterwards to make the pain go away. Yes. There's, if you're doing Murph, if you're ever doing anything high volume, do any kind of workout where you feel like, you know when you're going to be sore. This is an essential part of my workout routine, and now I want you to use it. Try the muscle rub before. It's non-greasy. You don't want that greasy shit everywhere. You know those guys that come to the gym and they get the smelly shit that you can smell everywhere. No, it's non-greasy. It's warming. Gets your muscles ready to go. And then the post-workout, you're going to use Tiger Balm Active. It's got a muscle gel. Again, non-sticky. Goes cool to warm sensation, and it's perfect to cool down. They've got a muscle spray if you're one of the big dudes, and you're having trouble getting to parts of your body and you want to spray it on there, or you just don't want your buddy, you don't want to do that suntan lotion thing where you're like, hey, can you put this on my back? If you got a sore back, you just spray this stuff on, and it gets to those hard to reach places. When you're in pain, you got to take care of it. So with Tiger Balm Active, I can work out hard, and I know I'm not paying for this later. So get ready to your workouts. Throw this in your bag. I'm telling you, here's what you got to do. Tiger Balm Active, 3 amazing products. Tiger Balm Active, Muscle Rub. Tiger Balm Active, Muscle Gel. Tiger Balm Active, Muscle Spray. Here's where you're going to get them. CVS and Rite Aid today. Just go in there, get your Tiger Balm Active. Just run into CVS or Rite Aid and just yell, "Where's the Tiger Balm?" And they will. Tiger Balm Active. Don't just say Tiger Balm. Tiger Balm Active. Where's the Tiger Balm Active? They're going to point you there. You're going to get it, and then you're going to thank me. That's right. You're going to thank me. Tiger Balm Active. So are you still pursuing the powerlifting at all? Or?
No. I retired about 5 years ago from competition just because you accumulate a lot of fatigue and some joint issues. I had some chronic tendonitis. I had a hip problem that 2 surgeons told me I needed hip replacement, 3rd surgery.
I get all this shit and look at the size of me. I can't imagine what you have.
Well, and I'll tell you what though, since then, I've completely rehabbed everything. My knees are 100%. I walk out 600-pound squats with no knee wraps or sleeves and bang them out for reps now.
Well,
I have no pain.
I'd also assume your diet is very low inflammatory diet, which is helping a ton with that.
Yeah.
Which is keeping your inflammation low in your body.
That's kind of a trigger word people use. They want to say certain foods cause inflammation. You got to be cautious. Some of these inflammatory responses are necessary. We call the hormetic effect, hormesis, and the body actually will compensate appropriately, and you'll get stronger as a result. That's what lifting weights is all about.
Sure.
You do damage, the body compensates and fixes the damage. But there are a few things I come out against. I try not to demonize too many foods, even though my vertical diet is very specific. I think it's because it's optimal. That doesn't necessarily mean I'll carte blanche try and demonize a whole host of different foods, even though I do eliminate some because I want to start with the foods that are easiest to digest for my athletes and the ones that are the most micronutrient dense and highly absorbable. So I do avoid a couple of things, and we'll probably start here because I think that it's even more important what you do not eat than what you do eat, particularly if you have some sort of digestion problem, IBS or an autoimmune disorder type of problem, gastric reflux. When I come across an athlete, and it seems that the vast majority of the people I work with, athletes and clients in general, express some sort of discomfort with the foods that they're eating. It's very, very common. And so I start them with a program that specifically addresses that, and it's low FODMAP.
So let me ask you: so you're catering your diet to I know you have the vertical diet, but you are also working with athletes where you're going specifically to them and to what they're doing, and it's not just your template. Like, here it is. This is my diet. Follow it precisely.
I start with a program that I think has been the most successful for the reasons that we just talked about, because it's the most easy to digest. It has the most micronutrients in it, the most highly absorbable, bioavailable micronutrients. And so I start with a list of foods that I think are optimal there. And then they can reintroduce foods that they may like. But I've just found that if I focus on digestion first and then getting adequate micronutrients, that everything else seems to improve.
Okay, so I don't want to give away your diet because you obviously, this is your business.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. I've got a 2-hour video in Iceland on the diet that's got 1.5 million views.
So I've got 1.5 million questions for you.
No,
so
I'm happy to share.
Start with the most easily digestible foods. What are you going to start with then?
Well, one thing that seems to have gotten a lot of stigma over the years has been red meat, particularly ruminant animals.
Well, you're talking to a crowd, this audience right here.
They understand it.
They eat it every day and night.
They get it.
Yeah.
The dieting industry has been chasing chicken and egg whites and whitefish for so long. Yeah. And it seems that when somebody wants to lose weight, that's what they go for. They eliminate red meat initially. And that's a huge one. Probably the most. If there is a superfood, that's it.
Yeah.
And the ruminant animals, the four stomach, they have a 4-chamber stomach, and so they can ferment cellulose fiber, and they can convert those omega-6s into 3s, and they're very nutrient dense. Iron, B12, zinc, selenium.
Well, you've got guys like Sean Baker now going on the carnivore
Absolutely.
diet that are saying you've got everything you need here.
Everything you need. I agree. If the ultimate elimination diet, if you've got people with autoimmune disorders or skin conditions, and
somebody just told me that pork is one of the most nutrient dense meats.
It's very nutrient dense. The only challenge I have with pork is they're not a ruminant, and they don't convert the omega-6s into 3s as well.
Interesting.
And so they have I think as much as a 24-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and then you get to chickens and turkeys, 17-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio.
Wow.
They're a monogastric. They have a single stomach, and they eat soy for their 3 months they're alive, and then we eat them, and they're just not as nutrient dense.
So your best bet is red meat.
It is. And, people say, oh, a lot of red meat. Look, you need to get adequate protein from somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you're a 200-pound man and you need 200 grams of protein, then the ideal source is going to be red meat for the majority of that intake.
What's your go-to?
Mine, it just depends. If I'm trying to stay leaner, I'll go with a top round or a top sirloin. And then, like Shaw, when we wanted to put weight back on him, we went with a ribeye.
Yeah.
So you just go with a fattier steak.
Yeah,
that's how
love the ribeye. I'm a big fan of bison.
Oh, I love bison. Yeah, bison's in there as well, and mostly because they're grass fed.
Yeah.
But that's another thing about red meat is that all cattle is at some point eats grass.
Yeah.
And they're just either finished on grass or finished on grains. And now we start to get into the realm where you've got your snobs that would
want
prefer,
the grass finished.
Yeah, they want to go to whole paycheck and drop their entire salary on a grass fed beef. And the fact of the matter is there's no difference in the micronutrients. There's a little difference in the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio.
Yeah.
Whereas a grass fed will be 3-to-1 and a grain finished will be 6-to-1.
Okay.
But comparatively speaking,
still better than chicken, better than pork.
100% better.
Interesting.
Than those.
I did not know that.
No, it's still an excellent source. The iron, B12, and zinc is still solid.
I was under the assumption, tell me if I'm wrong, because you obviously, this is your specialty, that grass-fed beef, if you're eating good grass-fed beef, it's the equivalent of eating like a wild-caught fish when it comes to omega-3 fatty acids.
Not even close, actually. In terms of that's one of the things when you quibble about the difference in omega-3s between grass-fed and grain-finished, grass-finished and grain-finished. You have to be careful because, again, they're weaned on their mother's milk. They eat grass throughout the majority of their lives, and they're just finished.
Yeah.
They're grass-finished or grain-finished. Their omega-3s are pretty small in quantity. A salmon has 200 times the amount of omega-3.
Wow.
So I absolutely throw salmon in. You notice Sean Baker's always got salmon in there too. A couple times a week because some people are concerned about accumulating mercury. But you can get omega-3s from smaller, krill and anchovies and get more omega-3s there as well.
I read an interesting article one time. I'm having a mind fart, whatever, right now, brain fart. My wife, when she was pregnant with our first child, was like, I can't eat fish because of the mercury, and can't eat fish, blah, blah, blah. So I did my research into it. Like, I don't think the Japanese are preventing them from eating fish, and they tend to have a very healthy society. And are they having these problems with developmentally delayed children because they're not eating, or because there is too much mercury in their fish? And I read something somewhere, it might have been Chris Kresser or something, that said the studies that they did that said that were coming from the Faroe Islands, where these people were eating whale meat. And whale meat is really high in mercury but doesn't have selenium.
Right.
And it said if you're eating whatever fish you're eating, if it's high in mercury but it's also high in selenium, the selenium cancels out the mercury, and so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and you get significant amount of selenium in your red meats as well, in your ruminants. So it's not a huge deal. I throw it in at least twice a week. You can have a little bit more. Another great thing about salmon is it's pretty high. It's got 100 milligrams of potassium per ounce.
I didn't know
and
that.
We'll get to potassium today, which is a huge, important thing for athletes in particular.
My question to you, too, take someone like me. I love fish, hate salmon. What do I do?
It doesn't matter. Any fatty fish is going to give you the omega-3s. And the smaller, the krills and the sardines are going to be good as well. And, of course, those ones have fewer chemicals in them.
Right. I got to just figure out how to eat salmon. It's such a good fish. I know it's so good for you, but I just...
a canned salmon, believe it or not, particularly the ones that are bone-in, can provide you some calcium. Because calcium is another really important thing that you have to consume. So, meat. I focus on red meat. But that's not 100% of your protein intake. Whole eggs. It's another huge piece. The biotin, the choline is really important for your liver health.
Choline only comes in the yolk, though, right?
That's the thing. It's that people have been pulling those yolks out and eating the egg whites.
Every day.
The egg whites have avidin in them, which is a hard protein to digest. When you cook them, it does make it a little easier. But the avidin pulls biotin. And if you don't have a yolk with biotin for the avidin, then the avidin is going to pull biotin from your system. And that's when people start to get problems. Biotin, skin, hair, and nails. That's where you see women present with low thyroid and hair loss as a result of just doing the egg whites.
I thought we were all over this, and I still go to restaurants, and they'll be like, hey, have the bodybuilder's omelet, and it's 5 egg whites. And I'm like...
That's the problem.
What's so bad about these yolks?
Bodybuilders and figure physique bikini, the professional dieters, I call them, they've done some things very, very well. They track their food and they meal prep, and that's fantastic. That's why they're successful. But what they do poorly is the nutrition, the micronutrient density of those foods. They also tend to over too much for steady state cardio, which tends to start rob you of muscle, as you've been experiencing recently with all of your endurance training. It's really hard to hold on to muscle. Really hard. And specifically for that sport, then maybe you don't want too much muscle, but in the figure physique bikini industry and bodybuilding, you want to hold on to every ounce. And same is true for people, just average folks that are trying to lose weight. You want to hold on to as much of that muscle as possible because it contributes significantly to their basal metabolic rate. So we don't want to lose that, because if their metabolism slows down too much and then they go back to eating even near what they were eating before, then they rebound and they end up with a lot of weight regain, and now they have poorer body composition.
Oh, I see.
They don't have as much lean body mass as before.
Yeah.
So the eggs are really important. People ask about cholesterol, but that myth has now been completely blown out of the water. Matter of fact, the research that's been done on burn patients shows that they recover the best from egg yolks. They were feeding them up to 36 egg yolks a day, and their recovery was much better, and they tested their cholesterol and saw no increase. There is a small percentage of the population that has hypercholesteremia. It's a genetic predisposition that they inherit. And those people you just monitor through a blood test, and you can see if you're exposed to that. But otherwise, egg yolks are extraordinary, particularly for older athletes. You get over 50, over 60. And the studies, the side-by-side studies, when you control for protein intake using egg white in one group and using whole eggs in the other group, the whole egg group has significantly better improvement in hypertrophy and hugely better improvement in strength when you compare the two groups together. And now I have Brian Shaw on 36 eggs a day.
Wow.
6 per meal, 6 times a day. Because he's 38. He's endured a lot throughout his career, but he's found that he feels a lot better as a result.
I hope he's got a backyard of chickens.
Yeah. So I think that those are two huge important sources. We mentioned the salmon. The other piece is going to be dairy. And I know this one's also been maligned, but the calcium's a huge component.
You've got an entire population that was raised, or the CrossFit population was raised on the... the paleo solution, Rob Wolf's book, and a lot of people are now keto, but they are very Usually anti-dairy.
Yeah, this is a hard one to have a conversation about.
Sure.
But what I see is that calcium is very important in the diet, and the most highly absorbable, most bioavailable source of that is dairy. We also see from the Weston A. Price's research all over the world that the vast majority of communities grew up consuming some sort of dairy and had excellent health. The research also shows that those countries that consume the most dairy are the leanest, have the better body composition, and that there's no connection with cardiovascular disease, and quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. The research is pretty suggestive. The problem is that some people are allergic or have an intolerance, a lactose intolerance, or a whey allergy.
Is it to the caseinate, though?
Two different things. Yeah. One is an intolerance from lactose, and then the allergies can be for casein or whey. It just depends on the individual.
Right.
And I'm constantly paying attention to how it's individualistic and dose dependent.
Is it common, though, or is it more rare than you think?
It depends on the population. African Americans tend to have a higher lactose intolerance than others. It also is dependent on the dose. And if you avoid it for a long period of time and you don't have a lactase enzyme, and then you reintroduce it in any significant amount, then you're going to be more susceptible to side effects, the gas and the bloating. So what I do is I go in and I ask the question, can you tolerate milk? And if not, then we'll go to a Greek yogurt. And they may be able to tolerate that better because it's lower in lactose. And if not, then we go to a cheddar cheese because you can get excellent calcium and K2 as well from cheddar cheese. And
K2, is that vitamin K2?
Vitamin K2, yeah.
Is that
it's really
the one,
important.
though, that can cause kidney stones?
No. It's really important for decalcifying the arteries. Usually oxalates can contribute to kidney stones. And vitamin K2...
Oh, I'm sorry. It's vitamin D that actually contributes to I know because they've found that lifeguards a lot that are out in the sun constantly all suffer from kidney stones a lot because they're sitting in the sun all day long. And that's one of the high dosage of
high dosage. You got to be careful with D, but most people suffer from low vitamin D. Yeah, and that's another key component is that you can't get that from the diet necessarily.
And the oxalates come from what, like spinach?
Spinach is one, and again, you have to be susceptible. Usually, for individuals who are susceptible, have a history of kidney stones, then you watch out for those things. But it's interesting that when you get adequate sodium, then you're not as likely to suffer from stones from oxalates. I've had one.
Yeah, you did.
In my whole life, just one. And they're pretty miserable.
I've heard. My friend had shingles at the same time that he had kidney stones.
That's
terrible.
And
he was like, I don't know which one wanted me to make me kill myself more.
Yeah, when I was bodybuilding, I used to do some of those diets, some of those egg white, low carb. And not that low carb is bad necessarily, but for a performance athlete in an anaerobic sport, trying to hold on to a lot of muscle tissue, carbs can be very, very valuable, and you find that you lose a lot of size and a lot of strength if you're not very, very careful. Yeah. So just to keep going on with milk, just to kind of close this out, I'm trying to find a calcium source. If I can't get it from one of those three,
milk, yogurt, cheese.
Yes, milk, yogurt, cheese.
Let me interrupt. Sorry. What about alternative milks? What about a goat milk or a
goat milk's fine
camel
too.
Milk or
those are fine. It's when you talk about things like almond milk that now you're in an area where you're not getting
really
the nutrition that you're looking for.
My buddy just came back from Pakistan. He did a comedy show in Pakistan. 2 guys. And I said, I can't believe you guys went and you're alive and you went as Americans, you idiots.
Right.
Because I got asked to go and I was like, no, you couldn't pay me all the money in the world to go to Pakistan. Nothing against Pakistan, but I want to live. And I said, tell me about it. What? And they both, 2 different people. The ice cream in Pakistan is the best ice cream in the whole world. And I was like, why? They're like, they use camel's milk.
Right.
They use camel's milk in the ice cream, and they go, it's out of this world.
Well, it's probably raw milk, too.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's been pasteurized. Yeah. And if they probably also use real sugar instead of all the sweeteners and stuff that we get exposed to. But that's kind of where I'm at on that. I'm chasing calcium. It's not just for bones. It's for nerve signaling. It's important for muscle contraction. So it has a lot of significant benefits that I'm trying to get. And again, just 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. I'm not.
How much? What do you need to get 1,000 milligrams? Give me an example. What will give you that?
I think you're going to need 3 cups 3 servings.
Of like milk.
3 to 4 servings. Yeah, it kind of depends on the source.
Okay.
The fattier.
I know a lot of guys when they're trying to build muscle, though, like guys that qualified for the games. I would go, "What are you doing?" They're like, "I'm drinking milk every day." You know,
well,
like
Rich Froning is famous for saying he drank a gallon of milk and then the Oreo cookies too. But that might be in the carb conversation. But nonetheless, we do. You know, we mentioned that the paleo in CrossFit is an excellent diet. It's served them well. It's not doesn't expose them to the deficiencies that you see in the professional dieting industry, bikini figure physique. But having said that, sometimes individuals will start to, I think, demonize certain foods because they've seen or heard that they're bad for them, and not appreciate the nutrient density that's in those particular foods. And so I do get a lot of CrossFitters will come to me with low thyroid, hair falling out, exhaustion, fatigue, etc. And there's a host of things that I try and address, and some of them we've already talked about and some of them we will. And I find that they end up demonizing certain foods. They won't eat dairy, they won't eat fruits, they won't eat red meat, and they're on kind of that dieter's diet. And I'm like, well, you're an athlete, and you're going to need all this nutrition even more so than a sedentary individual because you're burning through it like crazy. So that's my protein sources and what I think that they provide the best. We can bounce onto carbs.
Well, you've enlightened me a bit on a few of these things, and I geek out on nutrition a little bit, and I'm always trying to eat the best and have the family eat like that. So that's good to know some of these things. Let's go. Carbs.
Yeah, I just had a man approach me in the airport, and he was like, "Tell my kids that they have to eat their broccoli if they want to get big and strong like you." And I looked at him, I'm like, "No." Steak and eggs. Don't do that to your kids. Steak and eggs. And, you know, I've been saying this for a long time. I mean, but the problem is that there's been so much dogma against red meat and eggs and milk, and even that you tell a parent that they need to have their kids eat those things. And
it's funny.
They look at you like you're crazy.
I had Dr. Drew on the show.
Yeah.
Dr. Drew's doing the carnivore diet pretty much.
Yeah.
Who is it? Jordan Peterson.
Sure.
Been doing it.
Of course.
You know, there's a lot of people with this. I've heard people say, "Oh, yeah, it's great for an autoimmune disorder. It's to clean you up." In the meantime,
I agree.
But you know, long term, I don't know if that's something you want to do.
I don't know there's much adverse effects long term, but for sustainability, and that's one of the big things I talk about in my diet. It needs to be simple, sensible, and sustainable because, you know, compliance is the science. If you can't stick to it long term,
sure,
and people just kind of get burned out on
just
that
all
much,
the time.
That much restriction. And in my diet, I eliminate some things too, but I think it's broad enough and general enough that you can still have a good.
Please tell me you have a crazy cheat day every once in a while.
Here's the thing. I mentioned that people, when they fail on diets, 6 out of 7 people lose weight on any diet. It could be the McDonald's
because there's caloric
diet.
restriction.
Absolutely. And it's not that hard.
Yeah.
When most people lose weight on a diet, it's just they don't keep it off; they gain it back. And so I'm trying to get a step beyond what type of diet necessarily, and then how sustainable it is, and the reasons why people fail. And a couple of the reasons that people fail I mentioned were hunger and fatigue. They get tired and they get hungry, and so. People get hungry generally because they sodium restrict, and that causes them to get a sweet tooth.
So sodium's going to cause a hunger?
Yes.
I didn't
Your body, it wants salt, but it'll chase sugar and carbohydrates.
Interesting.
And really, if you can satisfy it by getting adequate sodium, you decrease cravings. Another one's potassium. Dramatically decreases cravings.
Let me back up for a second. It's funny. I heard somewhere sometime they said if you're craving sugar, which I have a sugar addiction that's ridiculous. And they said if you're craving sugar, eat a pickle or eat a dill pickle or eat, and that's going to put
salt. Salt. And I have a prescription for salt, and it comes from some of the smartest PhDs and researchers in the business.
I had Dylan Farr on here talking about salt, and people were writing to me going, "This guy's crazy.
It's going to kill people."
What are you?
I've been getting that for 3 years since I released my rant on salt.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I've been getting people just freaked out at how much better they feel and their performance skyrocketing.
Oh, he helped me so much with that. I was having muscle fasciculations.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what it was, and he's like, I got to get all your nutrients, your micronutrients up. He goes, you need to, your minerals. He's like, I need your sodium up. I need your calcium up. I need your magnesium up.
There you are.
All those things. He said, this will fix you.
100%. He's absolutely right for that. I work with Camille LeBlanc and Ben Smith and Becca Voigt, all for CrossFit championships last year. Ben Smith, about a month before regionals, he suffered from heat stroke. He reached out to me and said, look, I'm down and out. I'm heat stroke. So I reached out to Dr. Sandra Godek, and she's from the Heat Institute. And she's a PhD in thermoregulation and hydration. I said, look, I've got this great athlete, and he's a month out from regionals, and he suffered from heat stroke. And her folks helped me get a protocol for him to recover from that, which was primarily sodium and potassium, and just helped him recover. And then got a sweat test from him. They sent him a patch, and he wore it when he exercised, and sent it back, and they could determine his sweat rate, because not everybody has the same sweat rate. And then they could properly advise me to dose him for his training and for regionals, based on his personal sweat rate. And the general prescription is salt meals to taste. Your tongue will tell you. So you should always have a salt shaker at the table. Everything that you eat, give it a little salt and start eating it.
Any salt in particular?
Not necessarily. And we can kind of go down the road on that.
Yeah.
Dr. D. Nicolantonio is another expert on that wrote the book The Salt Fix. And he's got some preferences, but I think a lot of them can be, you get salt snobs. But I'll tell you why, as we get a little further down here, I think that it's not as important as people think, and it could even be adversely affecting them to be a salt snob. So we started dosing him with sodium, and it turns out that in addition to salting all of your meals, getting sodium before and after training is hugely beneficial to performance. It increases stamina and endurance, recovery. Your delayed onset muscle soreness goes down, increases blood volume. So now when you start training and your muscles start taking in all that blood, there's more blood circulating to oxygenate you throughout the training. It can definitely increase your time to exhaustion significantly, more so than any of the what are those things that people are taking, the NO2 and the vasodilators and arginine and all that stuff.
What about the right stuff? Somebody recommended the right stuff to me, which was that NASA kind of salt that you take for endurance runners take it.
Salt. Yeah. Whatever, as long as it's got salt. Sodium chloride in it.
I'll tell you a funny
Sodium
story.
in particular.
I'll tell you a funny story. I ran the New York City Marathon, and I had read about like how important salt was, but I also read hydration. Well, I panicked a little bit and overhydrated, to the point of what's it called, hyponatremia or whatever.
Yeah,
hyponatremia. I had it for sure. I was walking to the starting line. I pissed like 5 times.
Yes.
I just kept running, jumping fences, pissing.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it was coming out like clear as it was going in, and I freaked out. So I go to this coffee stand where they have coffee, and I said, they had sugar packets, and I said, do you have any salt packets?
Right.
And the woman goes, she looked at me, this big black woman, she goes, salt? Who puts salt in their coffee?
Yeah.
And I went, I need salt. And she goes, get out of here.
Yeah.
And I was like, lady, you're going to kill me. I'm going to die. And I literally hit a wall and had, halfway into the race, halfway in, like at a half marathon, where I was like crippled with cramps.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, like I did this by too much water, not enough sodium. I knew what I did, and I'll never let that happen again.
And what's funny is you look around the industry and you see people carrying around a gallon of water. Yeah. They're told to drink a gallon of water. Yeah. Well, water isn't what hydrates you. It's having adequate electrolyte balance that keeps you hydrated. And water can actually dehydrate you, as you mentioned. Sure. Dr. Sandra Godek talks about this in her research as well. It's not advisable to be sucking on water all the time. Her recommendation is one of the most experienced individuals and researchers in the world on this is drink when you're thirsty. Just like I mentioned, salt to taste, that's actually what the professionals recommend. Your tongue will tell you, your body will tell you when you're thirsty. And if you try and overdo one or the other, that's when you get into trouble. So in addition to salting your meals to taste, you want to take in 500 milligrams of sodium before and after training. And this is just a baseline recommendation that's approved.
I'm trying to picture what 500 milligrams
1/4 teaspoon of salt is 500 milligrams of sodium. Remember, salt is sodium chloride.
Right.
So 1,000 milligrams of salt is 400 milligrams of sodium.
Okay.
See how that breaks down. It's a 60-40. And salt's important, sodium chloride, because hydrochloric acid, so it's very important for digestion as well.
Sure.
We can talk a little bit about that.
Because we need more you need the hydrochloric acid
You
to break down the
definitely
carbohydrates that are coming in.
Yep, and the proteins and the minerals and everything.
And how do you, I heard you mentioning earlier today when we were working out that you do salt tabs.
Yeah, now, I don't like the quarter teaspoon or half teaspoon. I actually recommend a half teaspoon, 1,000 milligrams of sodium for Camille and Ben. And
Before and after working out.
Before and after working out. About 20 minutes before with 10 ounces of water, dose yourself with salt. You can take a half a teaspoon, again.
It's hard to take down just straight salt.
That's what I feel. So I get these thermotabs. They're on Amazon, and they're buffered salt tablets. Nun tablet makes another one, but they're pretty expensive. I had a $100 a month habit at one time.
Dylan told me to start into my mineral water, and I really couldn't taste it in Pellegrino.
One of the problems with something like Gatorade, and this might kind of go back to when you were drinking and having to pee all the time, is when you start introducing sugar, it stimulates the kidneys to release water, and next thing you know, you're pissing all the time. And so that happens a lot with people who have cut some weight for an event, and then they try and refeed and rehydrate, and they end up pouring a ton of Gatorade down, and they're getting a load of sugar. Yeah. And it tends to make them pee more. There's not enough salt in Gatorade to give you a physiological benefit. If there were an adequate amount for the dilution of water that was in there, it probably wouldn't be palatable.
So it's a waste of a product other than for taste.
They threw a little in there because it's necessary, but it's not enough. You know, it's kind of like pixie dusting a supplement.
Yeah.
And you use a proprietary formula, so you don't have to tell anybody how much is in there.
What about something we were just talking today about Pedialyte? So if you took the sugar-free Pedialyte,
that could be fine. I was just going to say, if it's the sugar, then you got to be cautious. Yeah. I think carbohydrates can be very important, but we can discuss that as well. But the sodium's what you start with. If I'm going to do something for a pre-workout, I'm going to start with salt.
Okay.
So 500 milligrams of sodium before and after. The International Society of Sports Nutrition recommends this. This is not a crazy thing that I'm throwing out here. I go to 1,000 because most of my athletes are working pretty hard. You burn 2,400 milligrams of sodium an hour on average for a hard training athlete. So look at the disparity there.
Yeah.
You're obviously not going to dose all of it at one time, but you're going to get salt throughout the day, and you're going to dose it before and after training, which is hugely important. Some of the patch tests that Dr. Godick does for the football players, like the Philadelphia Eagles linemen, they burn up to 4 grams an hour of sodium. That's 10 grams of salt in 1 hour.
That's crazy.
So she needs to design a protocol that rehydrates them adequately, or they're going to have, what happens is you have a cumulative depletion, and then you end up with all kinds of those problems that we talked about, maybe
and
a heat
explain
stroke.
To the people listening that it's not going to affect your blood pressure.
It's not, and we can take a little dive into that. Now, when you do these tests for blood pressure, and you feed sodium to people and then measure their blood pressure, the increase in systolic blood pressure, all the tests that Dr. Dina Clantonia looked at and put in his book, The Salt Fix, demonstrated they may increase blood pressure by 2 to 7 millimoles. So if you have a 130 blood pressure, it might go up to 132.
Ooh.
If you're hypertensive, if you're salt sensitive, which is a small percentage of the population, it may go to 137. But having said that, if you give them adequate potassium and magnesium, that increase goes away.
Okay.
So it's not a huge contributor to blood pressure. If you want some big contributors to blood pressure, I have a high blood pressure quick fix kit because I deal with this a lot with the big athletes I work with. And I put that in my vertical diet program because it's important. You want to take 20 millimoles off your blood pressure, take 20 pounds off your body. That's a huge one, is just losing the extra body fat. It's about a millimole of pressure per pound of body weight. You want to take 20 points off your blood pressure, get a CPAP if you have apnea. That's going to do it ASAP.
I'm dealing with that with my father-in-law. We're trying to get him to use it.
Oh, my goodness. It's life-changing. And that's one of the biggest things I promote in my program and trying to help people through that, a stop bang questionnaire. If you're snoring and waking up tired, you lose a ton of sodium at night. You increase your blood pressure, obviously, testosterone.
And if they're snoring, they're not very good at tolerating carbon dioxide. What
happens is that your oxygenation of your blood goes down.
Yeah.
And so you don't have that exchange anymore.
Right.
And you're not repairing at night. And that it affects not only your mental acuity, you end up with brain fog all day, but your recovery from training is huge. And it's not always just fat guys.
I just started with Whoop. I'm wearing the Whoop band on my arm to find out.
And however accurate or inaccurate that is, I think is less important than the fact that you're paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And as long as we can get you tracking and looking at it, it might get you to get to bed an hour earlier. It might get you to pay attention to whether or not the room's dark or quiet or cool enough, and you'll just start looking at the conditions. The sleep hygiene might get you to pay attention to whether or not you've got a dog or a child that probably should be in their own bed. Because they will wake you out of...
Hear that, Izzy?
I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and so we go through this a lot myself. I'm not being insensitive, but when I've got an athlete that's getting ready for something, I have to look at things like children in the bed or dogs or whatever, because they'll take you out of REM and stage 4 sleep, the restorative sleep, and you won't even really realize it. You might hear them squawk, or they might move and bump into you or hit you in the head, and you'll go right back to sleep and not think anything of it. But you've come out of restorative sleep, and you're losing the benefit of that. So that's a big piece. Not sure where we left off with. We were talking about blood pressure.
Sodium
we
blood pressure.
Hit on apnea for blood pressure, how big that is. Another big thing for blood pressure, a huge one, especially for women, is hypothyroidism. You take 2 groups of women. One is hypothyroid, low thyroid, and one that's normal thyroid. And you look at their blood pressure, and there can be a 20 millimole difference when you fix the hypothyroidism with, in this case, the study was done with thyroid medication.
Okay.
There can be a 20 millimole difference. Sodium 2 millimoles, hypothyroidism 20. Now you can start to see there's contributing factors that are much more relevant than salt. And when you restrict salt, now you've got an individual that probably ends up being exhausted and fatigued. They stand up from a sitting position, they get dizzy, especially if they're on medications, antidiuretics, and the like, because of blood pressure that the doctor prescribed them those medications for, but they didn't remedy any of the major causes. So it's important to look at those things with respect to sodium. People are afraid of it for a reason that probably isn't very significant. And even hypertensive people, even people who have had a heart attack, this research is very clear. I put it in the Vertical Diet, along with the studies and videos referencing the professionals. Even people who've had a heart attack, you do not want to take their sodium below 3 grams a day. It increases all-cause mortality from a host of other reasons, let alone their depreciated quality of life. So there is no circumstance under which you should go under 3 grams of sodium a day. And that is fettered out by one of the largest prospective epidemiological studies, the PURE study, on multiple countries with 100,000 people, and a host of other great research that's been done. It just doesn't make sense to go down to the DASH diet 1.5 grams a day. It just doesn't make sense.
So real quickly, because I want to get to all of them, when you said we can go down that wormhole of the different kinds of sodium, because I know...
I'll touch on it real quick, and that'll kind of get us into this next piece I think is important,
potassium?
which is iodine.
Oh, iodine. Okay.
Now, when you start picking, when you're a salt snob and you start getting your sea salts or your pink salts, you no longer get iodine. The table salts, generally the iodized table salts, have iodine in them. Athletes sweat out iodine, especially your CrossFitters, and when it's warm out, etc., doing the 2-a-day workouts, you get deficient in iodine. That affects your thyroid. Try iodothyronin is your thyroid, and it's got iodine molecules in there, and you need iodine. The vast majority of athletes, you can look at soccer player studies and the like, 65 to 85% of those people have low iodine, so that it affects their thyroid. So now all of those things that we just talked about in terms of blood pressure, cholesterol is affected by thyroid significantly. And of course your energy now, because your metabolism slows, your thyroid function, your feet get cold, your body temperature lowers. All of those things happen from iodine deficiency. So I have to put an iodine source in my diets, particularly for athletes, hard training athletes that sweat a lot. Iodized salt has obviously a lot more iodine than a pink salt or a sea salt, but they're probably not enough for a hard training athlete. You want to get an additional source of iodine. And I throw in cranberry juice. It's very rich in iodine, just a couple, 3 ounces.
The iodine, though, that's a processed salt, correct?
That's the problem. When the CDC added iodine to table salt back in the 20s because of goiter, which was a huge problem, especially up in the goiter belt in the northern U.S.
There's a goiter belt.
There's a goiter belt. Yeah, it's iodine deficient soil.
Okay.
Near the ocean, you have more iodine. The Japanese take in a significant amount of iodine from all the seafood that they eat. We take in much less. So usually 150 micrograms is the RDA. I recommend probably closer to 1 milligram a day.
Okay.
The Japanese are up between 15 and 30. So it's not a huge
let's say
recommendation.
I'm your product, or I'm your client here, and I'm eating at home pink salts or sea salts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out when I'm eating out and I'm using salt. I'm using iodine.
No.
Unless
you're using it at the restaurant, if it's in the food.
I mean. If I'm using the food at the if I'm salting my food at the restaurant.
Yes, generally they'll use an iodine salt. To the best of my knowledge, and I think some of them may opt not to. But
so, am I getting enough?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Particularly not if you're training and sweating.
Okay.
And that immediately will affect your energy levels, your fatigue. You'll have highs and lows, which caffeine contributes to that because you use that to compensate for the low thyroid and a host of other things. So what I recommend and what Dr. Dina Clintoni recommends is you get an iodine source. I use cranberry juice. You can use sea kelp. There's a little bit of iodine in dairy, but not enough. Can we talk about
how fucking horrible cranberry juice tastes?
It does taste pretty horrible, and so that's why I recommend the iodized salt.
It's brutal. It's one of the worst. People, we're not talking about like cran ocean, cran apple, cran raspberry.
Straight cranberry. Pure
not sparkling.
Cranberry juice.
Cranberry juice tastes like what I imagine Satan's vagina tastes like.
It will dry you out.
It's the worst taste I've ever had in my life.
Don't know SIBO people here because they might like it. They might try it and be, that's tasty.
I don't know. Okay, that's out. There's no way I'm doing that again.
You got to get iodine. So try a few sources. Try the sea kelp, try the cranberry juice, try iodized salt. But just make sure that that's one of the micronutrients that you pay attention to. We've got athletes who are religiously scooping out 5 milligrams of their creatine a day and putting it into their drink, but only getting 5 hours of sleep or have sleep apnea or iodine deficient. And it's just idiotic to me. You're stepping over $100 bills to pick up nickels when you're doing that.
Yeah.
So be cautious about how much you're majoring in the minors.
Yeah, exactly. You touched on sleep deficiency, but I was listening to, I think his name's, I forget his name, but he was on Rogan a couple times.
Oh, Dr. Matthew Walker. He's extraordinary.
That's right. Yeah. And he was talking about athletes and the sleep deficiency and how much it contributes to their performance.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything worse. And these teams go to events the night before the event, and I'm like, you guys are just...
No, they did a study. I think it was out of Stanford. They took the NBA schedules, and they didn't know the players or the names of the teams, had no idea. And they just analyzed the schedules for potential sleep loss, back-to-back games, cross-country travel. And they were able to select, I think it was greater than a 75% accuracy, the winners of the games. Not only that, but they were able to identify an increase in injuries. And this is when I think it was the Players Union got together and decided we
need to give them extra.
We need to get an extra day of sleep, just from the basis of this study. And so they did. I don't think they do the 4 games back to back anymore. That was about 2 years ago when the study came out. But yeah, it absolutely affected injuries and it affected performance just based on sleep loss. And so that's one of the big things that I tackle. If I've got a big athlete that's snoring and waking up tired, then I make sure that they get a CPAP. Vitamin D is another thing that helps with them. So we try and address all of that. I'm really aggressive with sleep, as we've discussed here already. It's one of the biggest components. So that kind of gets us through, some of the major things. We talk about vitamin D supplementation, magnesium supplementation, sodium and iodine, and how important those are.
Let's hit magnesium and potassium, because those are the two I feel like if we're...
Potassium's huge. Yeah, we can take a deeper dive into that.
Yeah.
We mentioned that potassium's so important for the water balance in the body, the potassium-sodium pump. Getting 4,700 milligrams is what's recommended.
Can you explain the sodium-potassium pump? Because I've watched videos on it. I've tried to understand it. My brain won't allow allow me to. And I'm sure that most people
water balance, potassium's intracellular, sodium's extracellular, and if you get too low in sodium, then your potassium will kick out of the cell and start drawing sodium in, and you'll get water retention. And that can happen from that direction. Okay. It's also important for nerve signaling, so you got the arrhythmia of the heart. If you get too low in potassium, you'll get irregular heartbeat from that. Potassium also binds to glucose to form glycogen, so it helps with cravings, like we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Potassium is another one of the things, in addition to salt, that I use to help curb people's hunger and cravings, so they're focused on the right thing instead of the wrong thing. It's also important for cramping with the body. So we absolutely will try and get athletes to eat 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
You have to be deliberate about it.
That would be what, about 4 avocados?
It'd be almost 5.
Oh, Jesus.
And you have to cobble together a host of different sources, and bananas isn't even close to the top of the list. So I throw a daily potato in. It was great to see that the paleo diet included a potato some years back, where originally it had not.
Yeah.
Because it's such a rich source of potassium.
They opt often more, and you hear, because of the glycemic index, you hear sweet potato over white potato.
Yeah, but a sweet potato can be high FODMAP, and some people respond poorly to it.
I've also heard how you cook
well.
it. The different ways of cooking it can bring out more
Still great potassium if you can tolerate it.
It is great potassium.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I've heard with the white potato that if you cook it, put it in the refrigerator right afterwards, and then recook it, you've lowered it.
You've increased resistant starches.
Okay.
And I'm actually not shooting for that with athletes. The thing about the glycemic index is it was the measurements were made based on consuming those carbohydrates by themselves. And nobody does that. When you consume the carbohydrates with proteins and fats, it dramatically changes the glycogen, the sugar load, the insulin response to those carbohydrates. So I don't focus on that at all, to be honest with you. And I don't think the American Diabetes Association recommends using that as well, because different people tend to respond differently to different carbohydrates, and when eaten with other foods, it tends to really blunt the sugar impact and the insulin response. So I don't focus on that, because I'm really only using carbohydrates for performance necessarily, and that's for individuals who are moving and exercising. That's why I do the 10-minute walks. I like the hypertrophy style training, because your muscles will draw in glucose in the absence of insulin, and so that's an important pathway to optimize. So I'm chasing potassium with the potato, and I'm not concerned about its glycemic index at all. I think that the athletes need to get the 4,700. That's one of the big ones. It's like 1,000 milligrams, 900 milligrams for a medium potato. You get 100 milligrams of potassium for every ounce of red meat, 85 to 100, and salmon. So if you're eating a significant amount of those meats, you're going to get good potassium. Fruit is something that's been demonized. Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little more about how important that is. But fruit will give you 400 to 500 milligrams of potassium per serving, and as will dairy.
Are there some fruits higher than others?
There are, like a watermelon might be more, and an apple might be less.
Yeah, I've done the comparison of watermelon versus coconut water.
Yeah,
and seeing that they basically say watermelon's a little bit better for you than coconut water.
A little better, yeah. And even Dr. Godek doesn't put coconut water or potassium in her recovery. They have a Levelin product that they sell that's high in sodium and a host of other small amounts of minerals, but they don't put potassium in there. They want you to eat it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I recommend as well. Kind of what I recommend with all my foods is that you focus on eating your meals and not drinking them. So get your 4,700 milligrams of potassium. It's kind of hard to do. You have to be deliberate about it. You have to cobble together a host of different resources. Hugely beneficial for performance for all the things that we mentioned. So that's definitely a cornerstone of my diet. That's why I throw a couple cups of spinach in there. It's also high in potassium and a little lower in calories, obviously, to people who have a concern for their total calories. Some people can't consume too many potatoes.
I just hate spinach.
Yeah.
I can eat it raw, like in a salad. It's fine.
Yeah, I do a blend in orange juice. I freeze the spinach and put it in some 4 ounces of OJ and blend it, and it makes a decent drink. Problem is, again, now you're concerned that are some people oxalate sensitive.
Yeah, that's kidney stones.
But it is a low-gas vegetable, spinach, as compared to something like broccoli or cauliflower or asparagus. Those tend to bloat you. They're a high FODMAP, fermentable oligomonosaccharides, and they end up in the large intestine getting fermented by bacteria, and so you'll have methane production. Also, cruciferous vegetables bind to iodine. They prevent iodine uptake. So you got to be cautious about anti-nutrients. And it's just like the phytic acid in brown rice. There might be a little bit of extra vitamins and minerals in brown rice.
All the legumes.
The legumes are hard too, and I'm not saying these are bad foods necessarily, but some people have a hard time digesting them, and the micronutrients in them are difficult for your body to absorb.
That's why the white rice, brown rice argument, white rice wins.
White rice wins in my mind because I'm only using white rice as carbohydrates to fuel workload.
Sure.
I'm getting a potato and some fruit in to get my
and you're going to use that as a
nutrients.
pre-workout too. Use that before you're working out to burn it?
The potato or the rice,
Yeah.
or I like meal timing. Obviously, calories is most important.
Sure.
Then macros and primarily protein is secondary to that. I think the research from the Diet Fits trial, the Stanford trial that was a year long and over 600 people, showed that when you control for calories and protein, that where you put fats and carbs have no impact on weight loss. You had equivalent results in terms of weight loss, and it also didn't have a disparate effect on insulin release. And Gary Taub's group was part of the funding of that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying yay or nay either way in terms of high carb or low carb. I'm just saying that the evidence suggests that there's no silver bullet there.
Sure.
And again, the best diet's the one you'll follow. And if you like to eat carbs, you can just control for calories and get adequate protein. Mm-hmm. So that's the same thing there. And if you're going to do keto, then you're doubly or carnivore. And I'm a big fan of eating plenty of red meat and eggs and salmon. You absolutely need to get adequate sodium because you'll lose. That's one of the first things you lose. And when you lose carbohydrates, is you lose water. And it's not water. It's got sodium in there too, minerals and electrolytes. Okay. So if you're going to do a keto diet or carnivore diet and you want to do it more successfully and not have all the energy loss, which is pretty typical for beginners on that, you need to be really doubling down and getting adequate salt.
I had Matt Walrath, who's a nutritionist, on the show, and he was talking about the keto diet. And he's a big advocate of carbs, and he was saying that all these people losing all this weight on the keto diet don't realize they're losing water.
Yeah. And some people, one of the things that the only reason I'll limit carbohydrates is because people tend to overeat them.
Yeah.
And then you've blown your calorie equation, and that's a big problem. All this stuff does affect hormones.
But there's good there's good carbs and there's bad carbs. Coca-Cola is not a good carbohydrate.
Right.
And pizza's going to maybe not be the best carbohydrate for you either.
Yeah, and it's dose dependent. And that kind of will get us, we'll go straight from Coca-Cola into the fructose conversation, because I talked about eating fruit and how important it is. It has some huge benefits. Absolutely increases body temperature, so thermogenesis increases. And fructose also seems to improve the liver's ability to convert T4 to T3, the inactive form of thyroid into the active form of thyroid. Probably 80% of it, 70-80% of it is converted in the liver. So as I'm focusing on thyroid function, by getting an adequate iodine and sodium in the diet, so that you can increase your thyroid, which is your thermogenesis and your body temperature, you're burning more calories at rest. That's your basal metabolic rate. One of the things that you have to do is make sure that you have a healthy liver so that it's processing that thyroid. And fruit helps with that, and fruit does raise body temperature. And so that's one of the reasons I put it in there. On diets, I might have somebody eat half a piece of fruit twice a day. Mm-hmm. If somebody's trying to gain weight, I'll put them 3 or 4 ounces of orange juice 2 or 3 times a day, and it actually increases their appetite. Another thing that I found is it can help bring your AST/ALT levels down. I've seen that in blood tests with guys in performance-enhancing drugs using orals that have elevated AST/ALT. When they introduce fruit into the diet, kind of dosed throughout the day, 3 or 4 times a day, their liver enzymes improve. So it does help the liver, which is the chemist of the body. Probably over 400 functions, the thing's the size of a football. And it's really important that you keep that liver in good health, and it will help with things like controlling inflammation, increase in estrogen, suppression of thyroid, all of those things. So I think it's really important that we don't demonize fructose necessarily. I know that we've been told it contributes to fatty liver disease, but it's dose dependent.
Sure.
And anything under, say, 90 grams a day hasn't been shown to have any adverse effect on health. And the proposal that I just made was 2 12-gram servings, 2 half pieces of fruit. It's 2 12-gram servings a day. So we're not anywhere near what could be considered compromising for health. But I think it's really important to keep fruit in the diet. I find that it absolutely helps people with their energy, increases body temperature, a host of other things, benefits that it has.
Magnesium.
Magnesium's huge, hard to get from food.
Yeah.
You might find it in almonds, a little bit in spinach, but again, with the anti-nutrients, hard to absorb unless you soak your
that's one of
almonds.
the things. It's one of the things I supplement with. I don't supplement many things, but I do magnesium at night.
I have two things that I supplement. One is vitamin D. It's hard to get from food. At 4,000 IUs a day. And typically I'm asking for a blood test because I want to see what your D25 hydroxy is. I've just seen so many athletes with vitamin D in the 20s, and I experienced it myself a few years ago, and it affects training as well. My bones were sore and aching.
Was that in Seattle?
That was in Seattle.
You won't have it anymore.
Yeah. Actually, I was in Vegas, but I wear a hat, and I don't go out in the sun all too much. I just don't enjoy it. I'm, half Irish, half German, so.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
But I live out and I surf every day, so I get my vitamin D.
There you go. And blood tests will show you whether or not you're deficient. And when you remedy that deficiency, you see significant improvements in your health in a host of different areas. So vitamin D and magnesium are the two that I recommend that just about everybody supplements. And the magnesium usually for dinner with food because it helps with sleep as well, as you've seen in some of the stuff that you saw in Joe Rogan with Dr. Matthew Walker. It can hugely contribute with sleep. I didn't mention with respect to sodium. I said salt meals, take 500 milligrams before and after training. I take 500 milligrams when I wake up in the morning with water. It really helps you with any dehydration that you may have had during sleep. I take 500 milligrams before bed of sodium because it increases antidiuretic hormone, which can then suppress the kidneys from continuing to create urine and make you pee in the middle of the night.
Okay.
Antidiuretic hormone is important for that. It's another thing that happens with guys who have sleep apnea untreated is they wake up 3 times a night because they're never getting into deep sleep. And it's in deep sleep that antidiuretic hormone is released to shut down the kidneys from producing urine. So you end up getting up 2-3 times a night because of your apnea, because you never release antidiuretic hormone. So sodium helps with that as well. So if you have that problem, get a CPAP and try dosing sodium. And people who generally might have been only able to sleep 3 hours before waking up to pee might be able to go 5 or 6.
Oh, wow.
So it can make a huge difference. And it's dose dependent. You might try 500 milligrams to start. If that doesn't work, go 750. If that doesn't work, go 1,000. And again, if you're a hypertensive individual that hasn't gone through all of the things that we recommended earlier, then be cautious.
Was your revelation of this whole thing, was this just all self-taught and self-discovery?
Well, I
and
personally
research?
experienced it. I had sleep apnea in the mid-'90s, and I didn't have insurance, and I couldn't afford to get a CPAP, and so I had to buy one from a friend. And nowadays, if I've got somebody that doesn't have insurance or can't afford a CPAP, then I'm getting them on Craigslist and getting them to get one. It's that important.
Still use one?
It's life-changing. I still use it at 250 with the thickness of my neck. And it's not just for fat guys. I was going to say earlier that Jordan Fagenbaum, who is an MD that runs Barbell Medicine, he's a 198-pound competitor, and he uses a CPAP. He's got a thick neck.
Well, it's interesting. My wife does those things where she's like, I watched you die last night.
Yes.
Like, what do you mean? She's like, you were like... And all of a sudden, she's like, you breathed again. I thought you were going to die. And then I'll look. I've just been doing Whoop for a few days now. And I'll look and I'll see this spike in my heart rate where it goes really high. And I'm like, I wonder if I had one of those little episodes right there where, in the middle of the night, I was it's...
Hold your breath.
I used to drink a lot. I used to party. I partied hard. And I don't anymore. I'm an old man with kids. And but when I did... There's nothing worse for sleep than drinking.
Right.
Drinking alcohol will destroy you.
Yeah.
And I had it a lot then. And if you feel like that, if that's my recommendation is if you feel like you're having sleep apnea and you drink alcohol, cut the alcohol because it tremendously made a difference in my life where it's like all of a sudden. And
there isn't much you can take for sleep. We talked about magnesium, but things like melatonin have not been shown to work and may even be adverse. They may help with jet lag on a long trip to take it the night you arrive. But it doesn't help on a regular basis, and other things, Ambien, etc., or even worse. They can keep you, even CBD can keep you out of REM or stage 4, and so it might help you get to sleep, but the quality of the sleep suffers.
Interesting.
So you have to be careful with those things. There are a couple things that help. Dr. Matthew Walker talked about them. One is keeping the room cool, of course, dark and quiet. Taking a warm shower before bed tends to cool the body. Another one he talked about.
It warms the body, but when you get out of the warmth, the cool is what...
Your body tries to cool itself down by shunting the blood into the periphery.
Okay.
And so the organs get cool. And so you have an easier time sleeping. And keeping a cooler room, probably somewhere 65 4 to 70 degrees right in there, depending on your tolerance level, but just so that it's not uncomfortable. But certainly, if it's too warm, it's going to be tough to sleep in. He mentioned another one that had some significant research that he was uncertain of at first, but he's seen that it definitely works. I talked about it recently in a rant, and that's a worry journal. That's just offloading a lot of the things that you're stressed about, or your to-do list that you have to do tomorrow that you don't want to forget. So you're laying in bed trying not to forget.
I had the worst night of sleep last night because I was thinking about doing Murph today.
Yeah.
I could not sleep.
Yeah. And just get out a piece of paper and write those things down. That's your worry journal. Obviously staying away from TV and phone at least an hour, probably 2 before bed, so the melatonin can work. So that's kind of a host of things that does work. There is no magic bullet.
So with the vertical diet, how are you offering this to people?
I've got a download on my site. It's you username and login password. And you download it on, and then it's a living document. So anytime I work with a client or I work with an athlete and someone asks me a question, I've received over 5,000 DMs and emails in the last year. The vertical diet is worldwide now. I've got probably over 100,000 people.
Yeah, I have a million people that have talked to that. Like, I know. That's the vertical diet guy.
So they'll email and DM me a question, and if it's not in the vertical diet, I'll add it. So the next time you log in, it'll be there.
Interesting. So
it's what I call a living document. It started out as version 1.0 and then 2.0 and now 3.0.
I wish our medical school books were those.
Yeah. Well, and I provide it for free. Anybody who's purchased a previous version, then they can get the updates for free. And now it's such that with the username and password, that every time you log in, it's updated real time. So the 3.0 will probably be the last version, but I'll continue to add different chapters. I added a water cut protocol and grocery shopping list and recipes and stuff to the recent version. So people had a quick start guide, so you could go in and in 5 minutes you can start the diet and have a menu and a grocery list and your BMR calculated and those things. So that's how I distribute it now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you're like you said, your background is in bodybuilding, and bodybuilding is a science. I mean, powerlifting, bodybuilding, but the bodybuilding part of it is probably, I don't know which one's more of a science, but there's everything from bodybuilding we know is, tons and tons of PEDs.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm sure you're familiar.
Oh, of course, yeah. Every IFBB pro and every powerlifter that I've ever competed against has, but that's an even playing field at that point. Now, how did I excel and become a pro, and how did I become the world's set world records? That's all of these. What we were talking about as little things today. They're monumental. And
I don't know if you heard Lance Armstrong when he said on Rogan's podcast. He said, I beat everybody on drugs. I would have beat them off drugs. If we were all off drugs, I would have won.
Yep.
But we were all on drugs, so why was his point was, why am I pointing out? And
I learned a lot along the way in terms of health as a result. And I got blood tests done almost on a monthly basis. I have over 100 blood tests over the last 10 years, where I monitored how everything I did affected me. How my sleep. How do I know that these things had problems with
absolutely
sleep
have to,
apnea?
Don't you, if you're taking any kind of testosterone or growth hormone or anything, you've got to monitor.
Well, if you're competing in anything, how did I know that to ask Hofthor to get a blood test so I could see if he had high hemoglobin and hematocrit or HA1C, because he's holding, he's got apnea, and you have to be careful with that. Even myself, at one point, if I had high hemoglobin and hematocrit, a general practitioner will tell you to go dump blood. You start doing that too much to control red blood cells, and all of a sudden your platelets go down and your stored ferritin, your iron storage, ferritin goes down. Now you're fatigued and tired and can't figure out why, because they think you've got polycythemia and it might be erythrocytosis. Thick blood is different than if you live in Denver at high altitude, you're going to have high red blood cell count, but you might not necessarily have thick blood. Sure. It might not necessarily be that your platelets are high, and you might have adequate iron, and but if your iron's high, then yes, you need to donate blood. But if it's not, you should be very cautious, because that'll significantly decrease performance. It shuttles nutrients and oxygen. So you have to be cautious. People that are donating blood need to be looking further. So I had a general practitioner tell me that. I go to an endocrinologist, and they're like, "Oh, no. You need to be careful, or it's going to impair your performance." So, I learned a lot along the way with the blood test. Obviously, I got a Bachelor of Science at the University of Oregon. My degree was in psychology, and I spent 2 extra years in their exercise science program. And I studied hormones and anatomy and phys and kinese and bio and physics and chemistry and OChem and core.
Yeah, I don't doubt you don't know your shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a passion of mine all my life.
Great. It's amazing.
Yeah, so,
I very few times have I ever said this. I'm going to listen to this episode. I'm going to listen to it because so many of the things you said, either I want to be able to recapitulate it to someone else or to my wife or something, or you confirm something that I already thought or had heard from someone else. But I feel like people out there, and also the people listening, one of the things I think is really important, and we were talking about the blood test. You say, and everybody says, you should get a blood test. But you go to your doctor, you go to your general practitioner, and you're like, I need a blood test. I'll get that. I'll show it to my buddy who's a nutritionist. And he goes, they didn't test any of the shit I need.
Yes, I have a very comprehensive test in there that I recommend.
Okay,
and
so
if you don't have a doctor, it's in there. Then you can use private MD labs. I tell you exactly which test to order. Can you go to Quest
Diagnostics or anything? Or
yes.
Okay.
Private MD labs, you can go to any Quest or LabCorp.
And you say, this is what I want.
Yeah. You actually order it online. They email you a requisition form. You take it to LabCorp or Quest, and then in 3 days they email you the results. And I have a whole section in there where I go over how some of the stuff we just talked about, how the results should be read and interpreted, and attach articles and literature that helps you understand why. Even things like an elevated AST/ALT, for somebody who worked out within the previous 72 hours, it'll be elevated. It's not elevated because of liver problems. Mm-hmm. Creatinine's the same thing. It's not elevated because of kidney problem. Potentially, it could be just because you have myoglobin release from muscle tissue breakdown from your recent workout.
Funny, I just had that, my blood test. I had
yeah, and it's not uncommon. It's totally unrelated to kidney or liver disease. Again, always consult your physician,
Sure.
But if they're not aware, and I've been to general practitioners who aren't aware that that's what the cause of the elevation was, then they might be a little alarmed, and whereas you would be quite comfortable. The diet, everything we talked about today is in the vertical diet. I go through and each section I have a prescription, just like we talked about today. So I can tell them exactly what they need to do. And then I include all the reasons why, and I attach, there's over 200 articles, videos, and peer-reviewed scientific research in there that I link so that you can go take a deeper dive if you need to get more information about each of these things. One of the big things I do in there, I know we've talked a lot today, but
it's been fascinating. I appreciate it.
I think we hit on some of the big stuff. One thing that I do for my athletes is just the logistics. I try and make sure that they have what they need when they need it, because we're busy people and you travel around a lot. And I travel like every weekend. I was in Fort Worth on Saturday. I was in Albuquerque on Sunday. I'm here in California on Monday. How do you stay on your program? People want to know.
It's so hard.
And the hardest thing to do is manage food and hydration, because it's the most important as well, that and sleep. I travel with my CPAP, so I solve the sleep problem. I only fly days. I never take red eyes. I don't land at midnight or 1 a.m., and I don't take off at 4 a.m. I'm not trying to screw with my sleep. So I manage that. If I have to go a day early, this is what I advise my athletes to do as well. I stay in places that have a kitchenette or a fridge and microwave at the very least. When I leave the house Friday morning, I've eaten breakfast. I put together at least 2, and sometimes if I'm going to the UK, 6 24-ounce thermos. That's those hot, they keep things hot. They're just on Amazon. I don't sell these. I don't make any money to tell you this, but it's life-changing. I said sleep apnea, getting a CPAP is life-changing. Getting adequate salt is life-changing. The thermos is life-changing for someone who travels or a busy individual who's away from the house and has to forage for food or miss meals. I pack a couple of hot meals in there, and I go hop on the plane, and now every 3 or 4 hours as needed, I'm eating the food I want to eat on the time schedule I want to eat it. And then when I land, I've put probably a dozen frozen meals into my checked luggage, and wherever I land, I pick up my bag and I take it to the hotel, and now I've got meals for the rest of the weekend when I'm doing seminars or whatever. And I show up to a seminar the next morning, and it might be a 7-hour day of doing a presentation and doing instructionals for the lift. But when everybody breaks for lunch, I'm pulling out another hot thermos, and my preference, of course, is my Monster Mash, my bison rice and bone broth.
That sounds damn good.
Yeah, so whether you prep it yourself or you get meal prep from a company, and of course I own a meal prep company, so I'm going to...
What is your meal prep company?
The Vertical Meals.
Okay.
Yeah, theverticaldiet.com. And we deliver nationwide. Meal prep, I mentioned earlier that what the bodybuilding community does well is they meal prep. And whether you prep or we prep, whether it's Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers, whatever it is, meal prep's the number one thing that leads to successful outcomes. We talked about 6 out of 7 people lose weight when they go on a diet. 95% of them gain back. Those who don't gain it back, successful dieters, the number one indicator of successful dieting is meal prep. It's the number one. It's been studied with all diets. And the number one thing that helps people comply is meal prep. And I'm not saying ordering my meals. I'm saying prepping your meals, either way, so that when you open the fridge, you have a pre-measured, pre-packaged, and that's another thing the bodybuilding community does. They pack their little Tupperwares, and they take them everywhere they go. I just got tired of eating cold food or chasing a microwave and the food going bad, and so I use the thermos and frozen meals, and I do them in that fashion. So now I travel all over the world. Almost every weekend I'm on an airplane.
And the bone broth, you're getting a lot of collagen?
Yes, the bone broth's great for collagen, and I won't try and make claims that it's some sort of magical thing, but it absolutely helps with digestion. Mm-hmm. It really makes it easy on the stomach. So the focus of my diet is to minimize gas and bloating, use lower FODMAP foods, use foods that are easy to digest. The bone broth's really significant. People who historically have had GERD and acid reflux, when they start eating the foods that I recommend, they can come off those medications. They can digest their food better. A lot of times, most of autoimmune disorders are a result of digestive disorder, digestion problems, acid reflux and leaky gut and the like. Those start to improve as well. And so I think that little tip, my pro tip for using that hot thermos for firemen or traveling people.
It's funny, people always look at bodybuilders and think, oh, that guy just uses a lot of steroids, that's how he got that big. And it's like, that's not what did it. He ate tons and tons of food to get that big. There was a ton of food, a ton of lifting, and a combination of two that, the steroids might have helped with the recovery and the muscle damage, but you guys, it's amazing the amounts of food I see professional bodybuilders eat.
Yeah, and when you talked about learning from experience, I did eat a ton of food, and I told you, I dirty bulked, and I saw what it did to my body, and I saw where my performance peaked out back in the mid-90s. And it wasn't until I was 44 years old that I had learned as much, if I knew then what I know now, I often say. And it wasn't until I learned what the more optimal way was to gain size and strength, the way that I was able to fix Sean Thor's problems, is because I experienced them myself. I went through the same problem. And then in bodybuilding, same thing on the flip side. I dieted incorrectly many, many, many times. I used egg whites and chicken breast and did tons of cardio, and I lost a massive amount of muscle, an enormous amount of strength, and it was this horrible yo-yo roller coaster of between fattening up for powerlifting and then losing everything for bodybuilding. And I started to figure out that there was a better way, so I was able to hold on to more strength, more size, and not have all the health problems that I experienced from the poor diet historically.
How do you feel about intermittent fasting?
Again, compliance is the science. If intermittent fasting helps you comply with your diet and maintain a calorie deficit, and it's the easiest for you not to be hungry or tired, then absolutely.
But not about diet. I'm talking about autophagy and doing cellular cleanup and
any calorie deficit and so is exercise. Yeah. So, in terms of health benefits, and you were just talking about all-cause mortality or life, extension. I don't see any significant benefit there that couldn't be experienced simply from having lost body fat, maintaining a proper BMI and waist measurements, and having some regular exercise, your cardiovascular fitness. I don't think it's that hard. Here's the thing that's troubling with intermittent fasting is when I deal with an athlete or I'm trying to hold on to as much lean muscle tissue as possible. The research, Jorn Tromlin, PhD in protein metabolism, put out an article, I think it was in Mass Research Review that Greg Nuckols does. And the recommendation is because your body has no mechanism to store protein. When the amino acids run out and your body needs protein to repair, amino acids to repair something, and they're not there, then you have to wait. All right, you can lose 10 pounds of muscle? Probably not. But it's not optimal. And I'm focusing here, we talked earlier about a good, better, best scenario. That's why I prefer ruminant animals over chicken. You can get protein from chicken, right? No problem. But the micronutrient quality is optimal in the ruminant animal. So in terms of intermittent fasting, when I'm working with an athlete or an individual who I want to hold on to their lean body mass, then I'm asking them to try and eat about every 3 to 5 hours. Again, 2 meals a day or 6 meals a day is going to give you the same, when you control for calories, going to give the same weight loss result. There's no difference between the two. But in terms of holding on to lean body mass or in terms of performance, of optimizing performance in the good, better, best scenario, I want you to get a protein bolus about every 4 hours throughout the day. And that's going to be about 4 meals a day. I think is going to be ideal for performance benefits. And so that's the only distinction I would make is in terms of just optimizing.
Sure. And then why all the bad press lately about the BCAAs?
Well, because isoleucine and valine really hasn't been shown to do anything. The leucine is what's been shown.
Leucine is what helps you build muscle, right?
Well, leucine, it seems that leucine seems to be important for triggering muscle protein synthesis.
Okay.
And but you get an adequate bolus of leucine, probably 3.5 grams, in any 20-gram serving of animal protein. Uh-huh. So it's there. You don't have to go looking for it. Supplementing additional when there's already enough doesn't do anything.
But if you're supplementing with a whey protein, you're basically having milk.
It's in there anyhow.
They're taking the whey off the top of the milk or that stuff that they take off the top of there.
Whey protein supplement is absolutely.
So that's not like doing a branched chain amino acid.
Not at all.
Okay.
They're just saying there's no research to suggest that branched chain amino acids have any additional benefit over getting a 20-gram bolus of animal protein that already has 3.5 grams of leucine in it.
Gotcha.
And whey protein would be that too. My only problem with whey protein is that it doesn't have the iron or the B12 or the zinc or the selenium in it. So I go with the whole food source. It's certainly a supplement that can provide you adequate protein.
When you can't get to a big
in
chunk
a deficient meal or in the absence of a meal, great. But I don't schedule it in. I've actually asked my athletes to come off of all shakes and try the food first.
Sure.
And I've seen that their digestion improves. The problem with a lot of those things, we didn't talk about this today yet, but we talked about vegetable oils being the scourge of the earth. The 3 C's and the 3 S's, canola and cottonseed and corn oil and safflower, sunflower, and those. I just think that the absolute scourge of the earth, and you shouldn't be eating any vegetable oils. Those are all your omega-6s. Sugar alcohols are also very hard to digest and can cause diarrhea.
Yeah.
And when
I know it in my Halo Top ice cream.
Yes, sir.
I know it.
That's the one, but it's in gum and it's in all those protein bars.
I blew my wife out of the bedroom the other night after a half gallon of Halo Top.
Yes, indeed, and that's what happens. It's also naturally occurring. Mannitol is in avocado. So again, dose dependent and individualistic. If you respond poorly to it and you eat enough of it, and it has a cumulative effect. So you can have, say, a little bit for breakfast and a little bit for lunch, and then by the time you have it for dinner, the same thing happens with gum. The more you eat or chew throughout the day, it tends to have a cumulative effect to where eventually it can cause some stomach distress and diarrhea. So you have to be careful of sugar alcohols. Those are horrendous, and so I try and eliminate those from the diet as well. And they're used as sweeteners to decrease calories.
I feel like I've asked you 7,000 questions that I've always wanted to know.
Well, it's all important stuff.
You're my new source.
Look, and that brings me to a point. It's never any one thing.
Yeah.
When you improve everything improves. Everybody wants to know what's the magic thing, Sure. And I've overturned every rock that you can imagine, worked with some of the greatest coaches and athletes in the world. I've spent untold dollars trying to find the answer, And
in this business, people will give you shit when you were wrong about something at one point. And you're like, I'm learning too.
Yeah, I've been wrong many times throughout my career, and I seek out information when that happens and try and impart that upon people who I'm teaching now.
Well, it sounds like the vertical diet is an incredible. I mean, like, you have all the things that it's people come to me often, that my friends that are just fat pieces of shit that work in a cubicle and never do anything, and they think I know something, and I'm like, I don't know shit. But they go, that. I go, all right. And I just love the fact that you've got on your plan what you're going to get in your blood tests, what you're going to get. This is how you're going to meal prep. This, because I can just go, don't bother me. Go to this. It's verticaldiet.com.
I really made it. It's pretty step by step. And it's because when clients come to me and ask me, I give them, I tell them exactly what I want them to do. I think that's what they expect. I think that they'd be mad if I gave them anything less.
Sure.
So
I do too, and you're paying for that, and that's what you deserve to get paid for that.
Yeah.
And if they're paying for it, they deserve to get all the information.
Yeah.
So it's great because you don't have a book that becomes outdated. You have a book that's being updated constantly, and it's just online where everybody's reading anyway. So is it verticaldiet.com?
That's where my meals are at. Everything's at StanEfferding.com.
Stan Efferding.
StanEfferding.com or theverticaldiet.com. But Stan, EFFERDING. At Stan Efferding's my Instagram if you want to DM me a question about our conversation
or
today.
Or if you want to ask for underpants.
Yes, those. Make a lot of money on those. Used, of course. They always want them used.
Have you ever done anything crazy like wrestled a bear or anything?
Never. Haven't done it, no.
Were you? You probably won't answer it, but were you like a bruiser? Were you like a killer? Were you like bounced at bars ever and just like smashed people? Look at the size of you.
No,
you've never used this ever for any physicality other than picking weight up over your head?
I haven't had to. You know, it was interesting. I was doing an interview with Les Gutches, who was a great wrestler, went to the Olympics and won the Pan Am Games, was a two-time national champion. I asked him the same thing. He says, no, he says, you never have to.
Yeah.
People just tend to leave you alone.
Yeah, that's what I think it was Rogan told me once. He said, learn jiu-jitsu so you'll never have to fight.
That's right.
Because I'm a hothead sometimes. I'll get out of cars and yell at people, and he's like, your ego is horrible. He's like, you need to fix that.
And that's one thing about this industry is that it turns out you end up being very humble because you get humbled when you're competing, especially when you start out as a 140-pound guy trying to become a bodybuilder or a powerlifter. There's so many freakish athletes, like we talked about, open today, talking about the guys that were there today.
Yeah.
I'm just looking around the room like, damn.
Yeah.
And there's so many...
That's how you feel. Think how I feel.
Yeah.
Me.
People that you've never heard of that can just do amazing things. And as I travel around and all over the world and see all these people with these extraordinary talents, it's really humbling. And also in our industry now with all the really brilliant minds,
But I mean, that's great. I mean, here you are, the best at what you do in different realms, and then coming across somebody in a similar world, a fitness world, that you look at them and go, holy shit, this guy can do something that I can't do at all. It goes back to the whole thing we were talking about Hunter earlier with them getting so upset about him, and it's like, this is a guy from a different world that's going to bring Mike Anderson said it great today about CrossFit. He said at the end of his L1 seminar, certification seminar, he says to them, if you have anything that's going to make this better, bring it to us. Give it to us so that we can grow and be better. This whole no, we don't want this guy in. He didn't qualify. And it's like, well, then let him prove it. And if you're all so good and you can then beat them and beat the shit out of them and prove it. I'm just...
And Hunter's a perfect example also. A lot of people ask me, what can you do for like a Hafthor Bjornsson or a 4-time world strongest man, Brian Shaw? When he comes to you, how can you improve that? And, like when you get a Camille LeBlanc, CrossFit national champion, what can you do for them? Somebody comes to you as a coach and they ask you, what did you do? And everything that we talked about today is what you do.
Yeah,
you start going through the list.
It's funny.
And Hunter today too. He started asking me questions, and all of a sudden I see him thinking, and he's interested enough in optimizing everything. We started talking over sodium and iodine, and he's like, and this light went off in his head.
He said that to me recently. I said, dude, you have more coaches than anyone I know. And he goes, because I seek out the best people in the world, and I know
ask questions.
And that's what Ryan Flaherty, who is the Nike head of training at Nike, told me. I said, what are these guys? He works with the LeBron James and Serena Williams and all the best in the world. I said, is there anything they all have in common? He said, they're all super competitive, and they all are constantly looking for that little edge wherever they can find it. If this shoe is better, if they need to eat more protein, if they need to work on their backhand, if they need.
Well, I heard LeBron spends like $1 million a year managing all of the stuff off the court.
That's incredible.
His training and his recovery and his nutrition, just having everything that he needs.
Well, Ryan's ridiculous.
For him.
Ryan's a genius, and I think Ryan has a podcast now, so people should start listening to it. But Ryan's so smart, and I talking to you, that's what I love about doing this podcast, is getting to, for a long period, sit and pick your brain. And I hope that I'm just like my listeners. I hope they all have my dumb brain and they're going, oh yeah, well let's soak this in and let's all get smarter together by finding someone who knows a lot more than we know. I also find it interesting that coming from the bodybuilding world, we talked about the PEDs. It's in CrossFit. They do the testing. Guys get busted. I'm of the firm belief of you do it like bodybuilding. You have the natural division and you have the assisted division. Do what you want to do. If you want.
the vast majority of people that are looking for an edge or trying to, as they get into their 40s and 50s, just find that, a lot of the things that they lost, they may have ED, they may have fatigue, they may have a host of other things. The vast majority of people aren't competitors, and I have a whole section in there on that kind of thing, hormone replacement therapy, to talk about the ways that you can do that it's the most optimal with the least potential downsides. So
sure.
That's in there as well. It's something that I think that I get a lot of questions about.
Stop
for guys
looking at me
over
like
50.
I need it. Stop looking at me. Stop looking. You said ED. I heard you.
Don't tell me, because I'll tell my wife, and then she's going to tell everybody.
No, this has been fascinating. I appreciate it. It was fun doing the workout with you today. I commend you to work your second workout ever to do Murph.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, that's like
the funniest thing is I texted my wife my time. It was an hour and 6 minutes, which is embarrassing, but I'm going to say it. It was an hour and 6 minutes it took me to do the Murph today, but I did everything. I did both the miles. I did everything. I texted her my time. She laughed at me, and she went down and did a Murph, and I think she got like 54 minutes. She beat me.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't going to let you get away doing it without her?
Nope. She hadn't even planned to, but when she saw that, she just had to beat me.
I finished, and as soon as I finished, I was mad, and I was like, I want to do it again. I want to do it again.
I could do better.
I know I could do better. And I was like, I feel recovered now.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do it. But I was like, maybe later this week I'm going to go back. And
I certainly won't be doing 500-pound squats the day before next time.
That was not...
Lesson learned.
When you got out of the car and said that, I was like... But I thought, I don't know what you're capable of.
Right. Now you know, about next to nothing.
But you said the squats didn't hurt at all. It was all that pulling that extra weight up.
That's true. The chin-ups were the downfall.
Well, now you know. So next year when we do it, you and I are both wearing... we're wearing vests and we're doing it. Yeah.
I'm in.
So thank you, and thank you. I'm going to thank you on behalf of the listeners who got so much information, and I totally get behind what you're doing, and I think it's such a great resource for anybody out there that's looking to get in any kind of shape, better athletically, better physically, better health-wise, better looks-wise. There couldn't be a better source to go to. So
I hope they enjoyed it, and I'm not a zealot, and I want them to be successful. And if they can find something here, whether it's the vertical diet or any diet, and they can learn to make it simple, and compliance is the science, and draw from some of these little things that can help them with their hunger or their energy, then I'd hope they'd incorporate it into their program.
Great. And thank you again. And thank you guys for listening. Make sure you go to iTunes, rate, review, comment. We're moving up the ranks. We're becoming one of these top podcasts in iTunes. So in the health world, I didn't even know we were in that world. But thank you guys for all the support. And thanks for listening, and see you next week.